destructive?
FM
Are they
Radio.
protecting their patch? I mean, being devil's advocate, do they have any points at all about overdevelopment or bypassing developers? Do they have any points worth considering or not?
Yes, they do. To be fair, I think that there's a strong push in some sections of the community that they don't want their suburbs to change. If you live in Hunters Hill, which is one of the laggard councils, you don't want anything to change in Hunters Hill. It's been like that for a long period of time. The problem we face, though, is they don't just want to protect the heritage protected items. They want to protect the whole suburb, wrap it up in plastic and ensure that nobody does anything that makes it even a little bit different to what it is today. That's the general attitude in North Sydney, in Strathfield, in Willoughby, in Waverley, City of Sydney, Hunters Hill, Wallara, Ku-ring-gai. You can see a theme. It's those suburbs where people just like it just the way it is. They've got access to beautiful beaches. They've got their own shopping centres and tennis courts. They don't want anyone else to come in to their communities. They don't want change. Now, unfortunately, that belies the housing crisis that we're currently in. We need everyone to be putting their shoulders to the wheel and contributing to the housing supply. And when I say they're laggard, what I'm talking is each council has been set a target, and the target takes into account the existing level of urban density. So it's not just the same target for everyone. You have more for the growth areas out in southwest and northwest Sydney and less for the inner city. North Sydney Council has only delivered so far 23.8% of its target. Strathfield Council, 25.6% of its target. They're way behind. And they're not making any effort to catch up. And that's where we say time for the state government to not accept this wanton poor behaviour, get in there and use a bigger stick, and maybe taking their planning powers away from them for housing is one place to start.
Mate, if it was me, I'd be getting rid of local government altogether, but that's probably not possible. Look, I understand that, by the way, and I've said that to my listeners often. I understand people saying, well, I don't want my suburb to be changed. I don't want its character changed. But every conversation I've had, Tom, with people involved in the housing industry says, I mean, the old days of the quarter-acre block with the hills hoist and the 3 or 4 bedroom home are over. Now, people might not like that, but it's just the way it is.
Look, and it's true all the way around the world, Tim.
Yeah, it is.
That stop growing and evolving die. Look at the Rust Belt states of the USA. Look at what Detroit used to be when it had large areas of employment and manufacturing in the car industry, and what it's become since it slowed down and the economic growth ceased. If you stop having the economic growth, your city dies. We need the population growth to drive the economic growth. If we're going to have population growth driving economic growth, we also need housing supply. And all the local councils have to get the shoulder to the wheel and help with that task. That's why it got the support of all parties in the New South Wales Parliament to get these changes made and to make things faster and better. Councils need to get on board.
Okay, now, devil's advocate again. You also don't want people throwing up, crap apartments all over the place that are poorly built. You don't want that either. So there has to be some middle ground in there somewhere to make sure it's good quality stuff, it's built, and where possible, you don't destroy the character of a place. You coexist. Am I on the right track or not?
You are on the right track there, and I think we had a problem in around 2017, 18, 19, where some buildings went up that were of a lower standard, and then we had all the controversy over Apple and Mascot Tower and all the rest. The building commissioner came in and shone a light on that. A lot of those players have gone from the New South Wales market now. They literally have packed up their bags and gone. That's a good thing.
It is a good thing. Yeah.
The Building Commission is now firmly in place and does audits on every apartment prior to them being completed. There is a whole process now of quality control that didn't previously exist. Okay. And I think that consumers can have confidence. Also, Tim, if I may, the government's released a pattern book, all designed by high-quality architects. They've got a low-rise pattern book and a medium-rise pattern book. If you use that pattern book, there's an incentive to the developer to have the planning process made much faster. So with the pattern book, you get quality. With the building commission, you get quality. I think things have changed.
Yeah, so there are good things in place. When you say process, just finally and quickly, are there too many people involved in the process? Is that part of the problem?
Yes. The more we can rationalise it, as your prior caller was saying, the more we can rationalise it and reduce the complexity of the system, the faster, easier and better it will be. We'll continue pushing for that, Tim.
Good on you. Thanks for your time. Good to talk to you.
Thank you.
Urban Task Force Australia CEO Tom Forrest. I mean, just don't start me on local government. Fair dinkum, you can't trust them to fix a pothole. And now we want local government to get involved in tracking down hate speech. You want them in charge of that? I mean, honestly, we're overgoverned. Grossly, massively overgoverned. Gary, regarding the Old Testament, which the Prime Minister wants us to read, if you believe Exodus and follow that, an eye for an eye, would that be the appropriate response to the Bondi atrocity? Is that what he's suggesting? Not good advice, I would have thought. No. The Prime Minister, again, and Craig, calling... you just save that up for social media, and I read a lot of comments about the Prime Minister and everybody else on the social media. But here, I just, name calling we can do without. But I understand why people are upset with the Prime, because I don't get it. As I said earlier this morning, I must be living in a parallel universe if what Anthony Albanese is suggesting is the right way to go. I think it's entirely the wrong way to go. 3 minutes to 8.
2SM. Sydney traffic.
Near the Blue Mountains, Lawson through to Katoomba, a diesel spill on the Great Western Highway westbound, and Springwood lights are blacked out on the Great Western Highway at George Street. In Blakehurst, a truck is broken down on the Princes Highway citybound after King George's Road, causing southbound delays. Try keeping this to yourself. The IKEA sale ends soon. That's up to 70% off hundreds of products in-store and at ikea.com.au until 19th January. It's traffic 2SM 1269.
The Nightline with Cheryl and Darcy. Weeknights from 8 p.m. With thanks to Baptist Care. Make the switch today and experience home care as it should be. Visit baptistcare.org.au/homecare.
Hello. Well, I'm very excited to find out what the stars have got in store for all of us, Jenny.
Well, there is a little bit going on.
Our very own Chef Daniel.
Let's open up Pandora's box, Cheryl, and let's do this.
Nightline with Cheryl and Darcy returns Monday, January 19 on Sydney's 2SM.
A family legacy that began in 1926. 100 years on, Penrite Oil is only getting started. Penrite's Convoy range of heavy-duty engine oils, gear oils and transmission fluids keeps trucks and fleets running efficiently. Convoy protects and extends engine life, keeping you on the road for the long haul. 100 years Aussie-owned and made. Penrite Oil, still driven. If your truck needs an oil change, learn more at penriteoil.com.au/convoy.
Recently retired and want to give back to the community? Looking to contribute to a worthwhile cause? Join View Clubs of Australia, a friendly women's network in your local community. View supports the Smith family to help Australian children in need break the cycle of poverty. Become a member today. Call 1-800-805-366 or go to view.org.au.
G'day, it's Alf here, your friendly mower parts bloke. Summer's here, and when your mower chucks a wobbly, partmeup.com.au. We're Aussie-owned, ship anywhere in the country, and stock parts for most ride-ons and push mowers. During summer, get an exclusive 10% off your online order. Just use the code ALF10 at checkout. So when you need spare parts for your mower, partmeup.com.au. The parts you need, delivered.
No more. Ugh. No more. Try Arbor Vitae Joint Health for the relief of pain and other symptoms associated with mild arthritis and inflammation. Arbor Vitae is wellness backed by science. A clinical study on Arbor Vitae Joint Health can be viewed at arborvitae.com.au. That's ARBORVITAE.com.au. Now stocked in all major chemists and health food stores. Always read the label and follow the directions for use.
I'm Jackie Richards. Court today for a man charged following an alleged pursuit in North Tamworth yesterday afternoon. Around 3 o'clock, a pursuit was sparked when patrol officers unsuccessfully attempted to pull over a vehicle, which instead increased in speed. The chase continued through several suburbs in the northern Tablelands before eventually coming to a stop where a 30-year-old man tried to flee on foot. He was arrested a short time later, charged and refused bail to front court today. The effects of ex-tropical cyclone Okoji are set to hit New South Wales south coast from today, with intense rainfall expected to batter the east coast until early next week. The far south coast, including areas such as Bega and Maribula, are expected to cop the brunt of the system, with totals of up to 200 millimetres expected by Tuesday. Heavy falls are also possible for the state's north, as well as large and powerful surf conditions over the coming days. US President Donald Trump is showing no signs of stopping his push for control of Greenland. Trump said anything less than US control of the nation is unacceptable on a post to Truth Social, arguing it will bolster the NATO military alliance if states were to seize control. The future of the footbridge used by the Bondi Beach terrorists on December 14 is up in the air. For some, the 100-year-old structure is a ghoulish reminder of the tragedy. New South Wales Premier Chris Minns says the victims should have the final say.
My personal view is that it would be
Lawsuit NATO Army, Google search. Individuals and groups have filed several lawsuits against NATO and national armies over the years for various reasons, including civilian casualties, environmental contamination, and professional grievances. A common issue is that international organizations like NATO often claim jurisdictional immunity, making legal battles challenging. Key instances of lawsuits include depleted uranium claims in Serbia. A team of Serbian lawyers is leading a legal process on behalf of over 3,000 victims who developed cancer, allegedly due to depleted uranium bombs dropped by NATO during the 1999 bombing of Yugoslavia. NATO has asserted it has full jurisdictional immunity in Serbia based on prior agreements, a claim the legal team refutes. Civilian deaths in Libya. In 2011, a family filed a civil lawsuit in Belgium, accusing NATO of killing 13 civilians during a bombing of a residential compound. In Libya, NATO acknowledged the airstrike but maintained it was a legitimate military target, a command and control center. Accidental factory raid in Bulgaria. In May 2021, the owner of a sunflower oil factory in Bulgaria filed a lawsuit after US soldiers participating in a NATO military exercise accidentally stormed and cleared his private business, mistakenly believing it was part of the training area. Military personnel grievances. Earplugs lawsuit. Nearly 300,000 US service members and veterans sued the manufacturer 3M for allegedly supplying defective combat earplugs that caused hearing loss. Ferrer's Doctrine. In the United States, the Ferrer's Doctrine is a judicial exception that generally bars active duty military personnel from suing the government for service-related injuries. This has led to legal challenges and attempts to circumvent the rule. Other internal disputes. Lawsuits have been filed by military personnel over various issues, such as a senator suing the Pentagon over an attempt to punish him for urging military members to refuse illegal orders, or a case involving a military appeals tribunal matter related to an effective remedy claim within a UFOR. Overall, the ability to successfully sue NATO or national armies is often complicated by legal doctrines like state or organizational immunity, which can limit an individual's right of access to national courts. In some cases, alternative remedies or special tribunals may be available, and legal battles continue to test these immunities in various jurisdictions. A close look into NATO's wrongdoings. China military. The 30th of June 2022, 3,000 victims of depleted uranium bombs have commissioned international lawyers to file a lawsuit against NATO. However, NATO tried to exonerate itself. China military online. Judgment no. Matt EUFOR 01 date, the 2nd of September 2023. The 1st of September 2023, 123. Having in mind the lack of competence of national courts and given the general nature of the principle of the right of access to a tribunal. International. JFC Naples.NATO.int. US soldiers storm Bulgarian sunflower oil factory by mistake. The 2nd of June 2021, the owner of a small sunflower oil factory in Bulgaria has accused US soldiers of illegally storming his facility during the NATO military exercise. Last month, Ma, South China Morning Post. Arduous legal battle against NATO for use of depleted uranium ammunition. Global Times. Belgium, family sues NATO over civilian deaths in Libya. The 27th of July 2011, Belgium, family sues NATO over civilian deaths in Libya. Attorneys have filed a civil lawsuit in Belgium accusing NATO of killing 13 civilians, including TH. The New York Times. Dutch courts give judgment on immunities of NATO Supreme The 16th of October 2017, second, the Court of Appeals rejected the argument that the immunity from execution would entail a disproportionate restriction on the plaintiff's right of acts. Lexology. News Wrap. Minnesota sues feds to stop immigration enforcement surge. The 12th of January 2026, in our News Wrap Monday, state and city officials are suing the federal Russian harassment of NATO personnel, families, the next chapter in information warfare. Military. Joseph V. Micallef is a best-selling military history and world affairs author and keynote speaker. Follow him on Twitter at Joseph Micallef. Keir Giles is a senior consulting fellow of the Russia and Eurasia program at Chatham House, the Royal Institute of International Affairs in London. He also leads the Conflict Studies Research Centre, a group of subject matter experts in Eurasian security. Giles has written extensively on European security and Russian military affairs. Recently, I sat down with him to discuss Russian harassment of NATO personnel and their families and how it fits in the broader context of Russian information warfare. JM, in a recent commentary for Chatham House, you reported that families of NATO personnel had been receiving harassing phone calls from callers you described as having Russian accents who had collected information on the families and homes of individuals deployed in the Baltic states for the purpose of delivering highly personalized disinformation or intimidation. KG, that's not a new situation. The incidents that commentary referred to were reported in Dutch media this month, but related to families of pilots at Dutch F-16s participating in the Baltic air policing mission. Patrolling Baltic airspace during 2017, Danish soldiers were warned of similar harassment ahead of their own 2017 deployment to the Baltic. Back in 2015 and 2016, I compiled reports for NATO that looked at the likelihood of this kind of targeting of NATO personnel in the larger context of Russian information warfare. Related, if Russia hacked me, it exposed the US Army family system. JM, you've suggested that this type of harassment is consistent with Russian views that warfare in the information domain can be used to simultaneously affect the entire depth of enemy territory. Is this kind of harassment going to become an integral part of Russian strategy? Is this a trial run? Will this type of harassment spread to US and NATO personnel deployed elsewhere? KG, it is true that the role of information warfare has undergone a revolution in Russian thinking about war. While the basic principles of Russia's hostile use of information remain unchanged, new technological enablers have transformed beyond recognition the ambition for what can be achieved. The key distinction is that, whereas traditionally, information warfare was seen as an enabler for military means, and an armed assault would be the final stage in a conflict once information and subversion had done as much as possible to weaken the adversary. Now Russia considers it possible to achieve strategic aims, up to and including regime change in adversary states, by information means alone, removing the need for the final armed conflict. This does not mean that information warfare has completely replaced conventional warfighting in Russian thinking. Russia is still preparing urgently for high-end, high-intensity, high-technology warfare. But the option of information effects achieving Russia's aims in a cheaper, easier and more deniable manner than open armed assault is an attractive one. JM, a NATO Defense College paper that you authored described this kind of harassment as part of a broader information warfare, which includes psychological operations, disinformation and a broad range of cyber operations designed to influence the perceptions and behavior of the enemy, population and international community at all levels. In turn, Russia sees information warfare as part of a broader offensive strategy that includes both military and non-military components. Presumably, this kind of activity is carried out by anonymous actors, preserving the Kremlin's deniability. How does NATO respond to an offensive strategy that includes both state-sanctioned and anonymous actors? KG, state-sanctioned and anonymous aren't opposites. But this blend of state and apparently non-state actors is a key element of some of the many definitions of hybrid warfare that NATO and its member states have produced since the Russian intervention in Crimea. Russia is content with deniability that is entirely implausible. But NATO has had over 5 years to rediscover Russia's long-standing approach to warfare and ensure that countermeasures are in place, including for when that warfare is undeclared. JM, how do Russian attempts to influence election outcomes in the US and elsewhere fit into this broader strategy of information warfare? KG, it's important to put the attacks on democratic processes in context. The attempts to influence the US presidential election didn't come out of nowhere. They followed a period of Russia testing its capabilities, escalating the scale and audacity of its cyber and information campaigns, and gradually discarding deniability. A key factor in the brazenness of the attempted election manipulation in 2016-17 was the failure of the United States to respond to what had gone before. It was a failure of deterrence which, as always with Russia, invited more overt and ambitious attacks. But the discovery, targeting and exploitation of weaknesses in democratic processes is entirely consistent with previous Soviet tactics of subversion, updated to take advantage of the new tools and levers presented by the internet. Again, the underlying principle is consistent for Russia. It is only the scale of ambition for what can be achieved with information warfare campaigns that has changed. JM, NATO was designed to be a military alliance tasked with deterring Soviet aggression against Western Europe. It was not designed to defend the culture and societies of NATO members from Russian disinformation campaigns or attempts to destabilize their societies or political order. Is this a task that NATO should assume? How does it do this? At what point do disinformation or social destabilization campaigns or elections interference rise to the level that they should trigger an Article 5 response? KG, this is not a part of NATO's mission, largely because for much of NATO's existence it did not need to be. During the Cold War, the governments and societies of NATO member states recognized the danger of subversion from Moscow and took steps to defend themselves accordingly. The gap in the West's defenses has come about not through a failure of NATO, but because of 2 decades when the threat from Russia was less apparent and governments and societies just forgot it was there. NATO itself is unlikely to be able to take on this challenge in full. This is not only because information activities are unlikely ever to meet the definition of an armed attack as specified by Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty. The contortions that NATO has gone through trying to work out whether its remit extends to the challenge of cyber aggression tell us how challenging the discussion would be. It is also because the defense against these campaigns is largely societal, not military, and mutual assistance between civil society is tangential to NATO's core functions. Other initiatives that run parallel to NATO, such as the British government's program for pooling and sharing of counter-disinformation information and resources among friendly states in Europe, are key to bolstering resilience against information attack. JM, Russian disinformation campaigns or attempts to influence elections or destabilize other countries are nothing new. These were all part of the Soviet arsenal during the Cold War. Is this just a case of deja vu, or do social media and the World Wide Web now make them far more potent weapons? KG, this is precisely what has happened. The principles of subversion and destabilization, and using democratic processes against democracies, have remained consistent not just from Soviet times but from Russian practice under the Tsars. They are a constant feature of dealing with Moscow. The hyperconnectivity offered by the internet, however, means that the tools and tactics used to act on these principles can now deliver effects incomparably faster, further and more cheaply. It is the recognition that it is possible to communicate with the populations of adversary states not only en masse but also in real time that has transformed Russia's level of ambition for what can be achieved through information attack. JM, NATO has been unwilling to comment publicly about the harassment of NATO personnel and their families. Why do you think this is? Should NATO be more forceful in denouncing such intimidation and moving more aggressively to protect the families of its personnel? KG, it is striking that all the known instances of harassment of NATO personnel and their families, including the spouses of Dutch fighter pilots, as reported this month, are now several years old. They date primarily from the period of rapidly increasing NATO and US presence and activity in the frontline states in 2015-17. By contrast, in a recent interview with the Estonian newspaper Postimees, spokesmen for the British and French EFP contingents in Estonia said they were not aware of any such incidents affecting servicemen deployed there today. Incidents of this kind would be reduced, but not prevented, by increased awareness of the threat and of information security measures among NATO service personnel. But if it is true that they have ceased altogether, this must indicate a conscious decision by Moscow to abandon overt harassment. The methods of targeting NATO personnel may have changed in order to be undetectable, swapping intimidation for covert exploitation. Alternatively, open approaches to NATO personnel and their families could have been one of the range of information measures that Russia was testing during that period, and observing the result. Other examples include the mass simultaneous telephoning of thousands of Polish officers from Russian numbers, or intimidatory approaches to US servicemen by Russian intelligence officers repeating details of their families and homes gleaned from incautious social media posts. Either way, Russia has demonstrated that it is both capable and willing to reach out and conduct personal and individualized attacks on the service personnel of its adversaries, including by means of their families and communities. It follows that this is a likelihood NATO and its member states should be fully prepared for in time of crisis with Russia, and that includes being open and forthright not only with service personnel, but also with the public about the threats to individuals and families. JM, how should we respond? Should NATO be phoning the families of Russian soldiers deployed in Syria? Legitimate use of information activities and information maneuver in time of conflict is one of the areas where NATO nations give the strong impression of being behind the Russian curve. Russian military thought leaders are convinced of the effectiveness of targeting with information effects down to the individual level, as demonstrated in Syria and Ukraine. We should hope that NATO countries are giving serious thought not only to protecting their own service personnel, but also to means of exploiting the same vulnerabilities with regard to Russian servicemen once hostilities begin. But no. George Kennan wrote from Moscow in 1946 that the greatest danger that can befall us in coping with Moscow is that we shall allow ourselves to become like those with whom we are coping. If Western nations abandon their morals and values in order to resist Russia, there is little point in resisting further because Russia has won. This includes targeting non-combatants, a deliberate Russian tactic in Syria and elsewhere, but not compatible with law or values upheld by Western democracies. It also includes joining Russia in waging undeclared hostilities. Russia already considers itself to be at war with the West in every domain except open military conflict. It is essential that Western nations recognize that simple fact in order to defend themselves, but to respond in kind is to endorse, validate and confirm that view. NATO vs War Crimes Lawsuit vs Army Syria Israel Iraq Afghanistan, Google search. Various legal challenges and investigations into alleged war crimes involving NATO member state armies including the US, UK, and Australia have been pursued in national and international courts. However, no NATO entity or its command structure has been successfully prosecuted for war crimes. NATO operations and legal challenges. Jurisdiction: the International Criminal Court (ICC) can prosecute individuals for war crimes, but it is a court of last resort that only acts if national jurisdictions are unable or unwilling to investigate and prosecute genuinely. Most NATO member states are ICC parties, but the US is not, which complicates ICC jurisdiction over the actions of US personnel without a UN Security Council referral, which the US, as a permanent member, can block. Case dismissals. Lawsuits filed against NATO member states in the International Court of Justice (ICJ) have largely been dismissed on jurisdictional grounds, such as the cases concerning the 1999 Kosovo bombing. ICC investigations. The ICC has opened preliminary examinations or full investigations into situations where NATO forces operated, including Afghanistan and Libya. In the case of the 2011 NATO intervention in Libya, the ICC prosecutor examined allegations against all parties but ultimately found no information to conclude that NATO airstrikes intentionally targeted civilians. National accountability. Accountability for alleged war crimes primarily occurs through national legal systems. Specific conflicts and accountability. Afghanistan. US forces. No US soldiers have been prosecuted by the ICC. Amnesty International has documented how the US military justice system has largely failed to hold its soldiers accountable for unlawful killings and other abuses, including possible war crimes. Australian forces. An Australian inquiry. The Brereton report found credible information of unlawful killings of 39 people by Australian Defence Force members. One former soldier has been charged with a war crime in connection with these allegations. UK forces. UK Special Forces personnel have been the subject of investigations into alleged extrajudicial killings in Afghanistan and Iraq. Iraq. Legal accountability in Iraq has been similarly limited, with most cases handled nationally or resulting in settlements in lawsuits against private military contractors for abuses like those at Abu Ghraib. Syria and Israel. Syria. Canada and the Netherlands jointly filed a case at the ICJ in 2023 against Syria for allegedly violating the Convention Against Torture. Israel. The ICC has had an active investigation into alleged war crimes in the occupied Palestinian territories since 2021. The ICC prosecutor has issued arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant for alleged war crimes and crimes against humanity, with Israel rejecting the court's jurisdiction and findings. South Africa has also brought a case against Israel at the ICJ, accusing it of genocide in Gaza. The International Court of Justice, Global Policy Forum. In light of the International Court of Justice's ICJ decision that it lacks jurisdiction on the 1999 NATO intervention in Kosovo, the author of this New York, globalpolicy.org, Understanding the International Criminal Court. For the first time in the history of humankind, states decided to accept the jurisdiction of a permanent international criminal court for the prosecution of the International Criminal Court. The International Criminal Court, OSLI. The 28th of June 2022, the Rome Statute established 4 core international crimes: genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes and the crime of aggression. The crimes are not subject. OSLI. Q&A, International Criminal Court, Human Rights First. The 16th of July 2024, the ICC is a court based in the Netherlands that countries anywhere in the world can choose to join. It is considered a court of last resort that steps in Human Rights First. Israeli war crimes, Wikipedia. Since 2006, the United Nations Human Rights Council has mandated several fact-finding missions into violations of international law, including war crimes. In TH, Wikipedia. Afghanistan, no justice for thousands of civilians killed in US NATO operations. The 10th of August 2014, the families of thousands of Afghan civilians killed by US NATO forces in Afghanistan have been left without justice. Amnesty International said in a new report. Amnesty International. Can the ICC prosecute NATO for war crimes committed in Libya? The 18th of May 2012, related * Raymond. Great. 13 years ago, * Stuart Ford. Isn't the bigger issue going to be whether there is reason to believe that crimes within the jurisdiction? Opinio Juris. Why allegations of war crimes against Australian Defence Force? The 8th of October 2024, in short, the Brereton inquiry into alleged war crimes in Afghanistan found there was credible information related to the alleged unlawful killing of 39 PEOPL. Australian Broadcasting Corporation. Afghan war crimes victims still awaiting justice. The 18th of May 2025, only one soldier has been charged in connection with the allegations. The long delays led United Nations special mandate holders in August 2024 to raise concern. Human Rights Watch. UK Special Forces troops face possible Syria war crimes charges, BBC. The 30th of December 2024, and MOD spokesperson said, our UK personnel are respected worldwide for the highest standards and action will be taken against anyone that fails to meet these BBC. NATO fears Libya war crimes investigation by World Court, NBC News. The 10th of November 2011, NATO fears Libya war crimes investigation by World Court. NATO fears it is about to be investigated by the International Criminal Court over allegations at NBC News. War crimes in Afghanistan, the Brereton report and the Office of the. Therefore, the preliminary examination was closed on the 9th of December 2020 without seeking authorization to open an investigation. Page 4. The ICC is currently under the Parliament of Australia. War Crimes Court issues warrants for Netanyahu and former Israeli. PBS. War Crimes Court issues warrants for Netanyahu and former Israeli. PBS. The International Justice System, Policy Center. The 24th of April 2025, despite this unequivocal ruling, Israel rejected the ICJ's findings outright, citing self-defense and security concerns. And continued construction of the Barry Policy Center. NATO case, Institute for War and Peace reporting. The 9th of June 2000, Lewis refused to go into details ahead of publication but said that once the report was made public it would become clear why the prosecutor had concluded the Institute for War and Peace reporting, IWPR. The United States must be held accountable for its war on terror. The 18th of February 2024, settlements were reached in 2 lawsuits against private military contractors. In 2013, a defense contractor paid $5.28 million to 71 former detainees held in Abu Ghraib. Al Jazeera. War crimes in Afghanistan, but the whistleblower goes to jail. YouTube Al Jazeera English. The threat of an action in response to violations of international law. On the 8th of June 2023, Canada and the Netherlands, hereafter referred to as the applicants, jointly filed a case at the International Court of Justice (ICJ) against Th. Small Wars Journal. Member states of NATO, Wikipedia. NATO was established on the 4th of April 1949 via the signing of the North Atlantic Treaty, Washington Treaty. The 12 founding members of the alliance were Belgium, CA. Wikipedia. NATO to be investigated by ICC for war crimes in Libya, Atlantic Council. The 2nd of November 2011, NATO to be investigated by ICC for war crimes in Libya. From Damien McElroy, the Telegraph, Luis Marino Ocampo, the court's chief prosecutor. Told the unit, Atlantic Council. Global Policy, org/https://archive.globalpolicy.org. The International Court of Justice, Global Policy Forum. In light of the International Court of Justice's ICJ decision that it lacks jurisdiction on the 1999 NATO intervention in Kosovo. The author of this New York International Criminal Court https://www.ic-.int. Understanding the International Criminal Court. For the first time in the history of humankind, states decided to accept the jurisdiction of a permanent international criminal court for the prosecution of the AUSTLII https://www.ostlii.edu.au. The International Criminal Court, OSTLI. The 28th of June 2020. Accountability for violations of the laws of war. Oxford Law Pro. Oxford Academic. War. Online ISBN. 9,780,191,847,790. Print ISBN. 9,780,198,810,469. As an Amazon associate, OUP earns from qualifying purchases. Chapter 10 Accountability for Violations of the Laws of War. Published July 2021. Navbar search filter mobile enter search term search. Abstract. This chapter covers the trials and convictions of leaders for crimes against peace in Nuremberg and Tokyo after the Second World War. It also examines the reparations regimes set up with regard to Iraq in 1991 and the Eritrea-Ethiopia conflict in 1998. The chapter explains how the crime of aggression operates in the statute of the International Criminal Court. It describes possibilities to demand various forms of accountability for breaching other rules of international law that are considered war crimes. Crimes against humanity or genocide. There is an almost complete listing of war crimes as well as an explanation of the significance of some war crimes being grave breaches of the Geneva Conventions and Protocol I. The chapter ends with a look at other forms of accountability beyond criminal prosecution, including the use of belligerent reprisals. The first half of this book concentrated on explaining how resort to war came to be outlawed in international law. The UN Charter now only allows for the use of force by one state against another in situations where either there has been an armed attack and the state acts in self-defense, or the Security Council has authorized the use of force where this is necessary to maintain or restore international peace and security. Where this prohibition on the use of force is violated by states and their leaders, it may be possible to have some sort of accountability. With regard to leaders, there were of course trials and convictions for crimes against peace in Nuremberg and Tokyo after the Second World War. The crime of aggression has now been inserted into the statute of the International Criminal Court, although, as we shall see, the likelihood of prosecutions under the eventual agreed arrangements are very slim. But accountability can go beyond individual criminal conviction. We will examine other possibilities involving compensation and memorialization. The second half of this book examined the laws of armed conflict. Here too there may be possibilities to demand various forms of accountability. Some breaches of these rules are considered war crimes and can be prosecuted as such. Command responsibility will attach to those who were in control and failed to prevent or punish such war crimes. And we will look below at several such forms of accountability. But, and readers will have guessed there must be a but coming, there are multiple obstacles to ensuring the rule of law in time of war. National courts are unlikely to challenge the government's decision to resort to force against another state. 1 International courts or commissions have rarely been given jurisdiction over such matters, and even then enforcement of payment of compensation will be problematic. The UN Security Council and the General Assembly rarely find political agreement on whom to blame or how to bring justice. Nation-states hardly ever prosecute their own forces for war crimes, to or even under the ordinary criminal law. With regard to the rare criminal cases that were brought in recent years in the United States, related to killing of civilians in Afghanistan and Iraq, we have had the spectacle of members of the armed forces and private contractors being pardoned by President Trump. 3 At the judicial level, courts are hesitant to decide cases against their own side that question. Proclaimant bias in arbitrator selection. Journal of International Economic Law, Oxford Academic. Get help with access. Institutional access. Access to content on Oxford Academic. If you are a member of an institution with an active account, you may be able to access content in one of the following ways. IP-based access. Typically, access is provided across an institutional network to a range of IP addresses. This authentication occurs automatically, and it is not possible to sign out of an IP-authenticated account. Sign in through your institution. Choose this option to get remote access when outside your institution. Shibboleth Open Athens Tech. ABC ordered to pay $150,000 fine for unlawfully sacking journalist and presenter Antoinette Lattouf. ABC News. The ABC has been ordered to pay a fine of $150,000 to journalist and presenter Antoinette Lattouf for her unlawful sacking. A federal court judge on Wednesday imposed the penalty for its breach of the Fair Work Act by removing her from the air during a 5-day radio presenting contact on Sydney Radio in December 2023 for reasons including her political opinions. It brings the amount the national broadcaster has been ordered to pay Ms. Lattouf to $220,000 after she was previously awarded $70,000 in compensation for non-economic loss. The court heard Ms. Lattouf was taken off the air after she shared a Human Rights Watch post about starvation being used as a tool of war in Gaza to her personal Instagram account. Justice Darrell Rangier found the decision was made to appease pro-Israel lobbyists behind a campaign of complaints, and the ABC had unlawfully terminated Ms. Lattouf's employment for reasons including that she held a political opinion opposing the Israeli military campaign in Gaza. The court was asked to rule on a dispute between the two sides about the number of separate contraventions of the Fair Work Act and clauses and paragraphs within it. Justice Rangier said the ABC's position during Ms. Lattouf's contract became more difficult because it was caught between the complaints campaign, its statutory obligation of impartiality, and Ms. Lattouf pouring fuel on the fire through the social media post. The judge said since its establishment the broadcaster had been a trusted, respected and cherished part of the Australian cultural fabric, and the ABC had made much of its board's statutory duty to ensure impartiality during the case. However, the ABC's conduct in surrendering to the demands of the pro-Israel lobbyists and taking Ms. Lattouf off air ignored the equally important statutory obligation of maintaining its independence and integrity, Justice Rangier said. The ABC let down the Australian public badly when it abjectly surrendered the rights of its employee Ms. Lattouf to appease a lobby group. The judge found the primary motivation for the termination of Ms. Lattouf's employment was to avoid criticism from political lobbyists, the media and sections of the public. The ABC and others cannot be allowed to regard a penalty as an acceptable price to pay for staving off criticism over the employment of an employee by engaging in unlawful conduct against that employee, he wrote in his decision. The judge previously found the journalist had been given advice that it would be best not to post anything controversial about Gaza, as opposed to a direction not to do so. The advice was also qualified by an indication that posting fact-based material from a verified source would be fine. We must be better, ABC boss says. ABC Managing Director Hugh Marks, who was not in the position at the time, said the broadcaster would reflect on the court's findings. It was not handled in line with our values and expectations, and Ms. Lattouf, our staff and the public were let down. We take the matter seriously and have reflected on the lessons learned and their implications. We must be better, he said in a statement. I would like to reiterate the ABC's sincere apology to Ms. Lattouf and wish her all the best in the future. The ABC has been given 28 days to pay the fine to Ms. Lattouf. On Tuesday, Ms. Lattouf posted on social media that the case had never been about money for her. To date, the ABC has spent well over $2 million of taxpayer money fighting me, she said. Whatever the penalty, for me this was never about money, it's always been about accountability and the integrity of the information our public broadcaster gives us, she said. I hope the ABC takes this opportunity to restore credibility, regain trust, and re-establish integrity. Because our democracy depends on a strong fourth estate. Ms. Lattouf's lawyers previously pushed for the court to impose a financial penalty of between $300,000 and $350,000. They described her unlawful termination as a grave implication of pro-Israeli lobbyists, which struck at the heart of the anti-discrimination protection contained in the Fair Work Act. That the ABC engaged in such conduct was extraordinary and alarming, her legal team said. And senior executives ignored procedural protections in a panic rush to beat a story the Australian newspaper planned to run about her removal. ABC legal team argued for smaller financial penalty. In February, it was revealed during a parliamentary hearing that the ABC had so far spent $1.1 million in its defence of the case. The ABC's legal team argued earlier this month that the appropriate financial penalty was between $37,560 and $56,340. Highlighting a perfect storm that confronted decision-maker Chris Oliver Taylor, the then Chief Content Officer. The ABC's counsel, Ian Neil SC, said there was an extraordinary and unique conjunction of circumstances surrounding the incident that was unlikely ever to be repeated in the ABC. The judge rejected an ABC submission that the contraventions arose in unique circumstances. He said former chair Ita Buttrose had confirmed the ABC often received complaints that its broadcasting was not impartial. Sometimes from both sides of the same issue. Pressures of the kind faced by the ABC in this case will undoubtedly arise again in the future, Justice Rangier said. The broadcaster also submitted extensive steps had been taken to ensure the same mistake is not repeated, including training to senior leadership team and board. The judge accepted the ABC had demonstrated contrition for the breaches since the June judgment. But he said that contrition came at a late stage and was certainly not as full as it might have been. Clive Palmer should withdraw defamation action to save taxpayers' money, Premier Campbell Newman says, ABC News. Queensland Premier Campbell Newman says federal MP Clive Palmer should withdraw his defamation action to spare taxpayers from paying the legal bills. However, Mr. Palmer, who last week served papers on Mr. Newman claiming Mr. Newman had falsely accused him of trying to buy the state's LNP government, says the Premier should apologise. The member for Fairfax is seeking $1.1 million in damages, with Mr. Newman's defence to be funded by taxpayers. On Fairfax Radio this morning, Mr. Newman said it was time Mr. Palmer was put under the spotlight. I'm a man of modest means, believe it or not, I'm doing this job for Queenslanders, he said. He is a multi-millionaire who likes to throw around these resources to try and shut people up. He is a multi-millionaire who likes to throw around these resources to try and shut people up. I won't be silenced by Mr. Palmer, and that's why I'm being essentially defended by the system, as other premiers have in the past. Mr. Palmer, it is hot in the kitchen, and if you're going to dish it out, you've got to be able to take it as well. I would suggest the easy way for him to save taxpayers' money is for him to withdraw from legal action. Mr. Palmer says he will not consider withdrawing the action until Mr. Newman apologises. The critical question is whether he'll apologise and say to the people of Queensland categorically what he said was untrue. The critical question is whether he'll apologise and say to the people of Queensland categorically what he said was untrue. And he had no basis to say it and he regrets it, Mr. Palmer said. That's the first step in me considering withdrawing my action. Mr. Newman responded by saying he stood by his comments. Mr. Palmer says the Premier is panicking. He doesn't know what to do, Mr. Palmer said. He's a poor little angry ant running around waiting to be extinguished at the next election. Palmer, all power and money, Blaigie. Meanwhile, Attorney General Jared Blaigie has defended the use by Deputy Premier Jeff Seeney of parliamentary privilege to call Mr. Palmer a crook. One of the state government's own backbenchers, Jason Woodforth, has today called for higher standards in the House following the comments last week. But Mr. Blaigie says Parliament is a place for vigorous debate. Jason Woodforth is a member of Parliament, he's doing a great job in his local electorate, he said. Parliament is a place for ideas to be debated. But on Mr. Palmer, let me make it abundantly clear, there is one thing that Mr. Palmer is interested in, and that's Clive Palmer, it's all power and money.
Right, I'm gonna leave it there. This is a mixed news. I'm into mixed sector. Love you.